Look, I mean, they continue to have struggles, similar to what we see with Intel. And I think you're really seeing almost a have and a have-nots in tech. And I think Cisco is struggling. And this just speaks to some of I think issues they're going to have. But look, you cannot cut your way to growth. And that's going to be the issue for Cisco going forward.
Just looking a little bit more at that point that you can't cut your way to growth. I mean, this is not obviously the only company that's doing job cuts. I mean, Alex was just talking about this at the start of the hour. What's your take on what the legs are, what the momentum is for job cuts in the industry? Are these all one-offs, or is this something that we're going to be seeing more of?
Look, Cisco's in the right lane going to 45 miles an hour. And so many of the rest of tech and AI, they're in a Bugatti going 100 miles an hour in the left lane. And I think what's going to happen here is you'll continue to see layoffs. I mean, look, if you looked up disaster in the dictionary, you'd see Intel. Look at Cisco. It's a have and a have-nots. There's actually a lot of growth that's happening in tech in terms of what we're seeing from hiring, but it's really the strong that are getting stronger. But look, that's why Cisco did Splunk acquisition and others. They're going to have to really do that through M&A.
Well, to that point then, is this just basically companies are diverting a lot of their spending to AI stuff, so their other stuff is not being spent on, which hurts guys like Cisco? You can also make an argument that it hurt Five9, for example, the software company. Like, is that what we're seeing?
Look, I think to some extent. But look, Cisco's had struggles for decades. I mean, it's really been on the wrong side of trends. They're trying to get into the right side of the trend. Look, AI it's disrupting sales cycle. It's taking spending from other areas. And that's why the strength we see in Microsoft, in Alphabet, and Amazon, of course, godfather of AI, Jensen, Nvidia, and others, you also see weakness in others. And that's why in tech, it's really you're either on one side or the other. And right now, unfortunately, Cisco's on the outside looking in.
Can you talk a little bit about the equity sell-off? And, I've seen some comments that this has removed some of the froth in big tech, and maybe it's a time to get back in. What do you make of that?
I think this was a golden buying opportunity. I mean, that's always been our view in terms of these macro fear, white knuckle events. The AI party is still 9 p.m. in a party that goes to 4 a.m. And we're going to have scares. I'm not going to say it's going to be 100% smooth, but everything we're seeing fundamentally and what we're seeing from our checks continue to show growth is going to be there. And I think we're going to see this tech bull market. It has sea legs. But look, the bears, they've been raw. Bears have been obviously hesitant on this, and they'll continue to come out in terms of fears like we saw this week.
Do you think, what kind of risk event do you think Nvidia earnings at the end of the month is going to be? Because I think we have Jackson Hole on the same week, so it's going to be a lot. Plus, it's the last week in August, right into Labor Day weekend. What risk event are we set up for here?
I think that's to get at the popcorn moment in terms of Nvidia. I mean, even if you look at TSMC and some of the breadcrumbs going into this robust demand in terms of what we see. And I think right now the street needs to see that to just give further credence to what we saw in Microsoft, Palantir, Alphabet, ServiceNow, and others in terms of monetization happen in AI. But that's going to be one of the most anticipated earnings calls for hearing from Jensen and Nvidia probably in the last 4 or 5 years.
Wow. So let's look past that earning call, and we're looking at late September. We've had perhaps a 25 basis point Fed rate cut, maybe even 50. But what we're also going to be seeing is probably more evidence that the economy is slowing. So what does that do to the demand story for all of this AI?
Yeah, look, but right now, I mean, balance sheets are as healthy as they probably have ever been. I mean, if you go back to the last decade or more, and you look at a once in a 40-year cycle in terms of AI spend, and as this sort of, I'll call them as a Goldilocks scenario plays out, we get through September, I think 2025 numbers come up in terms of for tech, and you're going to have more and more investors needing to play these names going into the next year because of where the growth is. Mm-hmm. And I think that continues to be the issue. Growth is in tech, and that's why I'd rather pay up to play these names that continue to outperform.
Let's go to TSMC, you mentioned that. So sales soared 45% in July, accelerating its pace of growth from that June quarter. And that's all about the strong demands for AI. Just walk me through when you see these kind of numbers, like what goes through your head?
Look, it goes back to any of the bears that have been sitting in those caves in hibernation mode the last 18 months. When they say AI is hype, look at those numbers. It goes the exact opposite. And I think we'll see the same with Nvidia. We saw it with Microsoft and others. That is eye-popping growth. That speaks to the demand story that's happening. You contrast that with Cisco and others. That's where the growth is. And that just gives further and further credence to the AI revolution playing out.
So looking further ahead.
Oh, she's like going like 2025. She's
No.
You went through the rate cut.
I went through the rate cut. No, there's one more event in 2024 that I would like to discuss.
Uh-huh.
Presidential election. Is this something that the AI play even cares about? Or is it just kind of, let's just make sure everything goes smoothly and then we continue with business as normal?
Well, I think it does, because ultimately, if a Trump presidency, if that ultimately happened, I mean, that you could argue that would be maybe negative for the AI trade in terms of tariffs, what that could do to China, U.S.-China cold tech war. A Harris ticket getting in would probably be more bullish for tech, and especially even on tech M&A, I think it would be probably positive there, depending on what happens at FTC and Con. So you could argue that that's something that the market's trying to figure out in terms of this Trump trade potentially reversing, and now what that means for Harris. But in terms of AI, the biggest issue comes down to China. Mm-hmm. Harris ultimately would probably be a little more bullish relative to that, similar to what we've seen. Trump would be negative.
Before I let you go, Dan, when you take a look at the winners, right, just hit me up with some of the losers right now.
I mean, losers are Intel. Mm-hmm. Cisco. I think a lot of legacy tech, you could argue like even some of the IT services are probably net losers here. And in terms of the winners, I think that's clear. But that's why it's a have and a have nots. And I think it's becoming more and more evident. And also, just could you say AI 40 times in a conference call doesn't mean you're an AI player.